Nestling family, greetings and love. You are tuned in once again. We are once again here in the capital city, Addis Ababa, the royal city of His Imperial Majesty, joined by another two very, very special guests on the show right now. Many of you may know of Imperial Voice Radio, where we also have a program. So right now it is an honor to be joined by two fellow Imperial Voice Radio hosts, but more importantly, also managing directors of Fairfield House, which is the home of His Imperial Majesty Emperor HaileSelassieI in the UK, in Bath. So welcoming to the show, Sister Pauline, Brother William. Give thanks to meet finally, properly in Addis.
Yeah. Nice to see you, mate. We made it eventually.
Yes. So you've been in Ethiopia now just over a week, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. How has it been? Is it first time or?
Yeah, the first time for both of us.
Okay.
And very busy.
Yeah, full of impressions. It's extraordinary. There's so much to process and get to grips with. Yeah.
And I think you've done a little bit of traveling as well.
Yes, we came in on the Friday morning, and the afternoon we were on ECB. The next day was Christmas, so we travelled, and then after that we've just been doing lots of travelling around His Majesty, to palaces, to places of interest, and meeting with people of interest, and people are interested in what we're doing. So it's been a very productive week up to today. So every day there's something else to do.
We did a little excursion to Shashamane as well. Met the EWF there, stayed with a lovely couple, like some Sombrine, Zion Train Lodge. Everyone knows the Zion Train Lodge. So, and we came back, we visited one of the net as well, and the resort. We looked at the villa looking out onto the lake, which is currently an Air Force base. It's been a good trip.
Yeah, for real. And obviously connecting with the community in Shashamane, the Rastafari community. Obviously in England we have a very big Rastafari community, and often gatherings at Fairfield House. Could you tell us about that experience meeting with the community in Shashamane?
I think it wasn't entirely what I expected, and I think maybe it was time. Because we've grown up knowing about Shashamane, hearing about the gift, and I think in my mind I just thought it was just one level and everybody was on this plot. But when we got there, we passed 12 Tribe, there was another section, then we went to EWF, then we went to the Blingy House. So in the time that we had, I don't think we explored it enough. So I think it would need a bit more time to actually to get the feel of it, and to meet with the groups who are actually in Shashamane. So we're hearing lots of land rights and lots of things going on down there. But again, for the short period of time that we were there, we couldn't come back and give you a good reasoning on that. So I think it's something that will come at another time. And also to continue the conversation with ones-on-ones who we have met, and we do know from the UK who have gone down and travel more regular. So,
yeah, I'd say we had a really warm welcome. I think it's very tough there. I think the ideal of having 500 families in a promised land, living the dream of the return to Africa is a really beautiful and it's an incredibly inspiring gift by His Majesty. I think the reality is very challenging for a number of reasons. I think we sensed that there was disagreement between the different groups or stakeholders that could be there. I think the EWF were the legal title holders mentioned in the proclamation, but they don't seem to have the proclamation. So there doesn't seem to be a really clear basis of what the land is. But we didn't with the 12 tribes, but I understand they were perhaps a little closer to His Majesty and have slightly different views and beliefs. I think almost all the individuals we spoke to have had challenges about encroachment on their land. I think people feel anxious and uncertain, and you really need a clear basis of who is legally entitled to be where. I mean, as well as tensions between the communities, there seems to be tensions with local people and tensions with the municipal authorities. And it feels that the municipal authorities wanted or were expecting investment, a really an organised approach to land and investment. That's what they need, and it's not really happening. So I think we maybe went to Shashamane thinking we're facing some challenges at Fairfield House and Bath. It's been hard work, but actually I think the challenges that Mickey's facing there.
It was, and I think meeting up on some youths as well who were finding it very difficult. So even speaking with them on what they wish to do and how we go forward with that. So we haven't left empty-handed, we've left to even to leave people to talk, continue the conversation, and as I said, in whatever way we can support when we get back, then we will do so.
But you need the proclamation. I mean, in Fairfield House, when the house was under challenge, Pauline went and researched the deed of gift. So she had written down, signed by His Majesty, exactly why Fairfield House was given, to whom it was given, and for whose benefit.
Yeah.
And that guides us all the time. So you've got to have the proclamation so that you know what land was gifted and to who and how that's then controlled, so that you can have proper title deeds and stuff. I mean, really, it's a very, very valuable gift, and EWF should be considered a very wealthy organisation which has a substantial responsibility for the administration of that land of beautiful quality. But it's challenging, clearly.
And so, touching upon the challenges you mentioned in Fairfield in England as well, there was even a problem with the grant at one time. I think the city, they wanted to take back control of the house, and as you said, Fairfield House was even gifted by His Majesty to the people of Bath when he lived. What could you tell us about that?
Yes, I think just like Shashamane, where anything that His Majesty is gifted, there's just a little bit of issue. But with Fairfield House, it was gifted to the aged people, and if you've been to Fairfield House, there's a plaque outside the door that states that, and inside we have the deed of gift that states that. So we knew what it was for, and it was a home for the elderly for many, many years until the 1990s. Then it wasn't fit for purpose. So what could they do with it? So they probably thought that nobody knew about the gift, or they could sell the house, and they came up with this idea to sell it. Somebody, a whistleblower, made it known, so they had to change tack, and they went with it being a day service. So Bemska was involved in that at the very beginning, but then in 2012 they came back again to say that yes, they couldn't, continue to maintain it. By now, Bemska is the only organisation in the building, where before there was at least 4 organisations. So one organisation doesn't seem fit. So Bemska had to look outside of that, to look at other communities, such as the Rastafari community, who was already on fringe, the Ethiopian community, the local community, to make sure that they were, they could support. But it also had to look at a body to start to represent Fairfield House, but Bemska in itself couldn't do so, not with the elderly organisation. So we set up the Friends of Fairfield House. That ran for a little while, but that still wasn't the heartbeat. So we then set up the CIC, which is more a governing body, and they have been able to support, to secure a lease now with the council, and to get us on a better footing. But coming up to all of that, that might seem like step 1, 2, 3, but there's lots of work had gone on in all those years, because the constitution had to be made, you have to have a business plan, you have to look at how you're going to raise that fund to do so, you have to start to work with so many different bodies. So these are some of the things that we shared with the EWF, that it takes time, but you have to have a body that can see the future. You don't look for today, you have to look forward. His Majesty, in his hindsight, when he gave that house, to look at 80 years later and it's still there, that is an achievement by those people who are managing Fairfield House, and Bemska, who has, because it's carrying on that legacy. So the age is always going to be the main part of Fairfield House, but we as the directors of the CIC, I see that as a stool, with the seat being the elders, and the stool, the legs, the Rastafari community, the Ethiopian community, and the local people. So that is what's kept Fairfield House going, and we hope that we'll keep it going for the longevity of that gift.
So today, Pauline and Keith and I, we met school children at Menlake School in Addis, and we met the heritage clubs. So these schools were set up with support from Rastafari University, heritage clubs, where they think, why is heritage important? What is our various different heritage? And why is it unique, and why should we protect it? And the children said some really smart things. One, for example, is that heritage is both tangible, like a building, and also intangible, like culture or statecraft or philosophy or books. And in Fairfield House, it's heritage, which the city hasn't always realised, because the city essentially is treating it as an old people's home. And His Majesty's gift has an intangible value, which isn't just about the building and the building that's going to decay. So we've set up a community interest company, a social enterprise, to protect and celebrate His Majesty's legacy. That means protecting the building, but also celebrating the wider legacy, the lessons he has for our community, his historical role, his statecraft, his campaign for human rights, and so forth. So we feel we're not there just to look after a building, we're there to bring together those three communities that Pauline mentioned, which is local people and Ethiopians and other African people and Rastafari. I mean, to each of those groups, this legacy is really important for different reasons, but we have to work together because the beneficiary of the deed of gift is the aged. So the deed of gift, just to be really specific, the beneficiary, the legal owner, is the Corporation of Bath, the municipal authority, which is now called Bath, North Somerset. The reason it was given was because of the warm welcome from the people of Bath, and the beneficiary is as a home for the aged. So people do sometimes come forward with confused ideas about who it was given to and who owns it and who should pay for it. Council's the landlord. As of 3 months ago, the tenant is the community interest company, the not-for-profit social enterprise.
And that's Bemska.
Bemska is a charity. It's been going now for 30 years.
Operates within the Fairfield House.
And
as held Fairfield House,
Yeah.
because of knowing the heritage, the legacy, it has supported lots of events to happen in Fairfield House, which is now, as a joint working with the CIC to make sure those continue. One of the things we have, as you mentioned, we have the radio station inside, we have the library, we have a museum, we have tours that happen in the house. Those things wouldn't happen in an older people's home, but the older people could see the future of Fairfield House, and to make sure these things are happening, we have community business in Fairfield House, because we have to look at how we're going to manage running Fairfield House, and it cannot run by people just turning up and thinking that we can have something here and we don't pay for it. The older people have to pay something to be at Fairfield House. Although they're funded, they have to make contribution because it doesn't run like that. So the CIC body is the stronger body now. That's looking further afield, not just to the older people or the community business or the little event. They have to look for bigger funding. So they're going for funding with universities, they're going with funding with heritage, they go with funding, with entrepreneurs who want to put something into Fairfield House. So yes, the plan is in process now.
So Bemska's, it's a charity that's always cared for the elders, but it's been stretched, hasn't it? Because Fairfield needs so much, and Bemska's been stretched, really. Pauline and our team have been stretched to cover all these quite demanding different roles. And the CIC has really taken a different view, which is we will be entrepreneurial. We're a not-for-profit, but we're going to set clear rules and procedures, and we're going to make the income that we need to meet the sort of bills of running and tending to other things. And we're going to campaign and work much more closely with the council for raising the really large sums that are needed to fix a building that hasn't been looked after for 30 years. Things go seriously wrong with a building if you haven't maintained it for 30 years. Those things are expensive to fix. So there's a sort of tens of thousands of pounds that we make from our university partnerships, the guided tours, the shop, letting a few rooms, and that helps with the day-to-day running. There's some bigger capital investment that the council, because it's still the landlord, has to make. But when we need to raise millions of pounds, like 2, 3, 4, 5 million pounds, that's we will never trade our way to those sums. We'll have to work with the council to say this is really valuable heritage for the following reasons, to the following communities which are not well served, which are underrepresented in the heritage which is available locally. So we really must make a strong case for proper investment to put this into a proper footing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really an amazing story as well. And you know how His Majesty even gave it for the care of the elderly. And how, you know, there has been this fight going on in this small quiet corner of England over something, you know, that is quite significant for all of the world, because we know how His Majesty spread across all of the world. So with BEMSCA and the other involved parties, you mentioned some of the other projects that have been taking place at Fairfield over the years. Could you go into a bit more detail? I know within the last 2 or 3 years there was the radio station being constructed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously weekly tours every Sunday, I believe, have become very popular. Yeah.
So where would we start on that? The cultural life of the house includes a library. We've been gifted the collection of Richard Pankhurst, who's obviously very well known in Addis, who's the first director of the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. So that's a responsibility. We had a librarian for a bit. We had Ezra writing a book.
Yes.
In Giz or in Amharic?
In Giz.
It was beautiful, beautiful, long handwriting. We've built a museum. We've assembled a collection which tells the story of the Emperor's exile and his time in Bath and his triumphant return. And that is very popular. It's not huge numbers. The house isn't suited to vast numbers. But Ras Benji, who leads the tours generally, takes small groups around for a very intense experience, which they really value a lot. They're very emotional afterwards.
It is a very emotional. If anybody wants to watch the Facebook page, you know, there's always a little glimpse of people telling their story. That we've taken it one step further, that we have a testimonial project coming out of that, so people can tell us their stories of His Majesty time and how they met him and the impact it made on their lives as well.
We've introduced a table tennis tournament because His Majesty was a big, keen table tennis player. Princess Sahai, pretty good with the back. And what's nice about that is it instinctively brings all the communities together. I mean, if it's a Nyabingi, it would be one community, or if it's the Ethiopians, you know, it would be. They're all individually welcoming, but they're particularly. The table tennis tournament was quite.
Yeah, so we're going to make an annual.
I think we are, yeah.
So the start last year was the first, so this year is April the 29th. I believe it will be the days.
Did someone say finalist?
Oh, sorry.
Anyway,
he was in the finals.
It was Ping, really, from BEMSCA. It was really cool. So also the Ethiopians now do a race for Adwa when they recognise that you can't just come at the table and eat the food and not pay the bills, sort of thing. So they have an annual fundraising event where they all put this app and measure their running and walking, and they want to cover the whole distance from Addis Ababa to Adwa. And then they come down from London on the train and they all walk from Bath Abbey. You know, what was it, 120, 150 of them? 50. Flags, drums, a really celebratory arrival at Fairfield House. So that would be an annual event. It's really.
And that's good to see, because you know what, as you said, Fairfield House is a little bit out of Bath, and it's that little cornerstone. Yeah. So to have things happening at Fairfield House and people seeing the colour here and hear the noise. We also celebrate His Majesty's birthday, Coronation Day. You have the Saturday, the monthly Rastafari Sabbath with Ras Bandeli, you know, so there's lots of things that's happening at Fairfield House, and I know that there's a small group to come with, you know, to about Rastafari reasoning in the house, and the library also, you know, that they will make use of, or anyone coming on African history, so we're thankful for that too.
We should talk about the EWF as well and what they did. So the Fairfield House area includes a 70s bungalow which had an overgrown bramble garden and a fence, and the council, which is very short of money, thought they could save money by letting that bungalow to an NHS client who needed a lot of support. And this is a problem because it would break up the balance of the house, and also that garden was the site of greenhouse where His Majesty and Empress Menen would pray. It was literally the first Ethiopian church in Britain because they had a sacred tabot brought from Jerusalem. So we were trying to sort of negotiate our way through this, and actually EWF and other volunteers went and ripped down the fence, cleared out all the brambles, laid out a beautiful sacred garden, and then the mayor visited and said, oh, what a lovely sacred garden, and then it became an established fact, and now in the lease they've agreed to include the bungalow and the sacred garden area in what we're leasing. So that is really important when we come and see the churches here, and how important the faith leaders here see the work at Fairfield House, and particularly because it was the site of Britain's first Ethiopian church. I mean, thank heavens that action was taken.
Yes, but we were at St Mary's today,
Yeah.
and we met the Archdeacon,
Yeah.
you know, so as I said, our journey has taken us to places that we never even thought of.
Yeah.
You know, some of the places have just been things that we've read in
Yeah.
Keith's book, but you know, people have just been welcoming and
Yeah.
thankful
Yeah.
that we have done. So we see Fairfield House as the catalyst now, because it's reached out where and to have met so many of the different gifts of His Majesty, that we feel that we need to make that pathway so people
Yeah.
we get to talk to each other and to know, so that the exile years become a part of their project as well
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
take on board His Majesty's life in our project. We just do it in bits because we would look at it as His Majesty from birth to death. You know, we just knew of his exile because that's what people are coming to Fairfield for. But I think now we just need to take the whole story in each one of us, you know, from Unity to Jubilee. Yeah, everybody needs to get a bit of that story.
That's a really good point. So in Bath, we think, a few years ago we thought people are ignoring this, they're not really aware of it. There's been a really big turnaround in the last 2 years in the heritage community, the council, the officers and the politicians. They now really understand that Fairfield House is something very, very important for Bath. So we feel happy to have seen that change, and to come to Addis and to see what they've done to Menelik's Palace, Unity Park, and how they have completely refurbished it and made it something very important. We were taken into Jubilee Palace and we saw all the works, which are flat out. I mean, they're due for completion in 9 months. They're completely refurbishing this vast place with all 149,000 artifacts, including gifts from foreign leaders, have been housed in newly built breeze block buildings while the refurbishment work is going on. So the small thing that's happened to us in Bath is a huge thing happening here. And we're saying, well, we think we're part of this. We think if His Majesty's palaces are being reappraised, we think we're part of that movement. And so it's been very moving to
and
see.
we've been welcoming to all the conversation,
Yeah.
to Trinity Church,
Yeah.
to Selassie Church, and everyone I've just opened the door, and all these places have been closed because they've been doing, some restoration work. And for us to turn up and somebody comes and open the door and say, yes, you can come on in, you can come and see all these things. We just feel blessed. Just feel blessed for that.
Yeah, so Pauline has faithfully been carrying out Her Majesty's wishes for now 30 years to care for the elderly. And to see her in the Jubilee Palace addressing not just the architect leading the work, but also the director of the palace, and also the director of all the palaces, who reports directly to the Prime Minister. And Pauline's just saying from the heart why what we do in Bath is so important. It's a really beautiful moment.
It is, and I think that people may look and see, well, for instance, what we do. Well, you've been there for so long, but everything takes its time, and I don't see anything bigger than it is. And I've always just done what needs to be done. And I did an interview recently, and the thing I said was you have to have patience and time. If you have those two things, something will happen. But you also have to be looking, like we did with the children today, you have to look to the future. You cannot be looking, or you cannot hold something yourself, you have to share it with others. And that sharing is what we're doing right now, because then people are hearing what we're doing, we're hearing what they're doing, and we're passing it back down to others, so that goes forward. And I think sometimes that's where groups lose themselves, is because they feel that they have ownership to one thing and not to share with others. So, and I don't think from Fairfield House that will ever happen.
Give thanks. And so, what obviously we've reasoned about the book Imperial Exile, What can both of you tell us about His Majesty's time in Bath? You know,
I'd say talk to the expert. I think you just did, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah.
So we have another interview with Brother Keith Bowers. You can check that one out as well.
What I'd say is that his time in Bath is very important for Bath. You know, it was obviously important for him. It's obviously important for Rastafari and in Ethiopian history. But actually, in Bath, a city which has a black population, but it has a quite a complicated and not entirely happy history with people of African origin. His Majesty's visit, the warmth, the evident warmth between him and the people of Bath, has the potential for some sort of redemptive quality, which is terribly, terribly important. So I would say, I feel as strongly as any Rastafari or any Ethiopian how important his time in Bath was. And I'm really happy to work with everyone to help fulfill his wish, which is that Nova Scotia basically carry on doing its good work.
Yeah, I feel that one of the things that we've heard a lot here, even up to today, was how the British had helped him. We all know that when he first came, they were distance from him, and that's why he was down in Bath or Devon. And he wasn't on his own; he had his family with him. So you can imagine how he would have felt, being distant away from the life of Ethiopia, number one, but even London, where he could get the support from the embassies and that. So, but we know that the people in Bath welcomed him. We know that the British people did, and we know that the British did help him to get back to Ethiopia. And we've heard a lot of that since we've been here. We did something last week. It was the Queen's Jubilee. And we had pictures up, and people were surprised to see His Majesty and the Queen, because they didn't see that connection. And yet, I met up with a family member of his today who said the support that the Queen had given to the family, and it's those things that people don't hear about. You only hear what you want, what is shown to you. But to hear it, one of the things on this journey is listening to some family members who are telling you, which we wouldn't have got if we were sitting in Fairfield House, but by being here, you're actually hearing how that all went. So we know that His Majesty had some sad time. We have on our tours we've done on Sunday, there's a pianola in Fairfield House. So it was given away. His Majesty was so kind, he gave away everything, but the family gave it back. So it was restored for our freedom in the city by Dr. Sean Sobers. And we played that pianola. When we played, we just tell people that although it was a house that was sad, it was also a house of life, and it was a house His Majesty would have been sitting here with his family. So we play that every on Sunday tours, and that just brings a smile to people's face. So we imagine that His Majesty would have been smiling. Like I said, the table tennis, there would have been his prayers, there would be the outings that he did within Bath as well as outside the Bath. And Ras Benji, our historian, he finds so much information. We have in our kitchen just a picture of His Majesty who'd gone on a camping trip with some young people, and he's standing there with them. So there's always something. So it was sad, but at the same time he had to make it live, and he had to be able to show his children not the downside but the upside as well. So, and that is what this remembered is.
I completely reinforce what you're saying about listening and how you learn surprising things. And you talk about the attitude towards royalty. One thing that we heard on this trip, which really surprised me, was hearing Prince Berda talking about his incarceration. And he was incarcerated with Jamaican people, with Rastafari. Yeah. And they had a very good, warm relationship. And people sometimes say the Imperial family isn't very sympathetic towards Rastafari. And yet, when the Jamaicans were released, they came and visited him in jail. And when he was released from jail, they were the first to meet up. So I thought that was interesting.
You speak to the persons or people, and especially you speak to the board itself. Because people can, come in with their own ideas, and they can come with the wrong information. But we just want people to be able to come and see us and talk to us. And as I said, we want to we are very transparent, because as a CIC board, we have open Zoom meetings, and if people can't come there, Plus, even some of our trustees, they don't live in the UK, they live abroad, but they can still come online, and we welcome anyone with expertise to be a part of that group as well.
Yeah, we're doing open surgeries every Friday afternoon fortnight, so you can come with any questions for the CRC directors. I think the other thing that's changed recently is that, so we used to have a very remote relationship with the council. Excuse me. I think it's the Addis dust. And now we have a monthly partnership board at a really senior level with the council, and those also will be transmitted. So you can see exactly how, you know, the really top level work towards securing the future of Fairfield House is being done.
You mentioned some involvement with some of the royal family of His Majesty still up until today. How have you found, you know, that connection, or, you know, like working together with the royal family to keep this legacy preserved?
I would say they are an essential stakeholder in the legacy because they understand it. I mean, Princess Sybil, whose funeral we went to this week, was the last survivor who lived at Fairfield House with HaileSelassieI. So that's very significant. You know, their relatives have been there. The whole refuge and the redemption story affects them very greatly. And also, royalty is a complicated and delicate thing, you know, with really detailed nuances, and they can bring an insight and an understanding to them which no one else can.
That is true, and I think the real story is going to come from them. When we're hearing about the imprisonment of that, we're hearing about His Majesty's last day. It's coming from them. It's not written in a book. You know, people can assume, but you're hearing the real thing. But like with any oral history, you have to capture it now, because people get older and then people will pass, and that goes right across. So, you know, and they, by being here as well, we have known one or two, but being here we've met many, and younger as well as older. So it has been, you know, our trip has been very, very important and informative.
I mean, it's their history. It was a family home. The family lived there, as well as the seat of government and as well as the Ethiopian church. But first and foremost, I think it's a family home. So they care very greatly about His Majesty's reputation and how his legacy is perceived. And I think they really value Fairfield House. And they can be incredibly helpful in preserving it, having it properly understood, and celebrating its importance.
Give thanks. We've mentioned the museum, the sacred garden. We mentioned there was the chapel that His Majesty and Empress Many used to pray in. What, for people that might want to come and visit Fairfield House, what, you know, kind of things might they find other than just the house itself?
Well, a warm welcome, you know, food, music.
Yes, again, there's a lot of things. There's also inside a chapel dedicated to Empress Many. So that was a new project last year. So we have the outside sacred garden, and we have it inside. We have events that goes on. You have a gallery space as well. So there's artists that would exhibit inside the house, so you will have that as part of your visit. But the tour, and we have to remember that it's a living house that's doing a project. So we don't welcome people when the elders are in the house, because of the safeguarding that we need to do. But we do, you know, we'll have things that will be put on our sites to let you know when there's an event going on that you're welcome to attend, or any of the events that's there too. So.
I mean, it's a cracking tour, so it's great.
Yes.
A story and a narrative. It's a lovely garden. It's a sort of 1850s, quite grand Italianate villa of the sort that there are quite a few in Bath, but that's nice. We've got a shop there selling excellent books, t-shirts. We want to bring back some spices from Addis. We have our own brand of coffee.
Yes,
Ethiopian coffee.
Yeah.
There's books, there's lots of little things that we're beginning to put together now, postcards and things like that. But also, just by coming to the house, it's just the experience, because even on the tour, there's artifacts that we have that people have given to us, things that we've purchased. And one of the things that we have that people always find amusing is little soldiers, and it's doing the Battle of Adwa, or it's doing the Emperor on the field of battle, so things like that. And even where he traveled, I think before we left, we have an exhibition of him going to the Caribbean, so to Jamaica, to Haiti. And when people from those countries comes in, they're so surprised to see that. So then, there's that as well. And it's just sharing that His Majesty didn't just come from Ethiopia to Bar, but when he did travel, he traveled all over the world.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about connecting with the whole world, Imperial Voice Radio, broadcasting goodness to the world. This is one of the latest additions to the house. Can you tell us about this project?
I thought it was a terrible idea. I said, we've got to take on the lease, we've got so much work to do. You seriously want to start a radio station? I think this is madness. So I went to the first meeting of all the volunteers so I could work out how to kind of torpedo it. But the enthusiasm that was there was so unstoppable, and the training was good, and so I got into it myself. Pauline and I both do shows now. It's,
No, it was good, and it was an idea for many people, because people came and said, you should have a radio station, but what did the radio station entail? So people never had that insight, but one person did, was Peter Green, because he already worked in radio, and he was a DJ, and music and everything was his. So he came with a proposal, and we all listened, and we said, okay, as we do, we're going to set it up, and then we will flow. So we found a room, and he did. And then the training happened, and a few people came on board, and some from the original is still there, because it's probably about 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
But we've had new people coming on, because it's an internet station. It then can flow from anywhere. So I know that even you yourself, Jamaica, can get some program on. I've just started recently doing something called Armchair Conversation. We're talking to my elders or community, and we just record on there. Sometimes it's live, sometimes it's pre-recorded. And William himself has a program on there called...
In our city, we recorded one this morning, didn't we?
We did.
So I think Rob Mitchell did a great job with the training initially. I think you've got to do a shout out to Mr. Bunny. I mean, a lot of these projects, there's some volunteers now who really holds it together, and Mr. Bunny does a fantastic job running the platform. Which
he's the one who puts all of the Roots Jewish programs where they need to be.
He does. Yeah. So they have the managers panel, and for some reason they've invited me, and it's nice because the novice, you're just learning all the time. And just being in Fairfield House myself, just knowing how people come in, I wouldn't know how to turn it on, but I just know that when people come there, and you asked me just recently about Chronics and being there, it was really nice. But not just Chronics, there's other artists that passed through the house as well. And but he's probably the first one that we actually did an interview with upstairs. And so it can be a live studio as well as it doesn't do that. But the house can be a live studio, because when we have the bingy going on downstairs or the celebration, we can actually take radio downstairs and broadcast, or even outside and broadcast. So there's lots of people. There's not probably shout out from many of the presenters, but you have to pick them all up because they make sure there's shows that's going on to that program. And it's diverse, because it's not, people think, when you think of Fairfield House, you think of it being a Rastafari house, and it's nothing like that. You think of the radio station, and it's not. It's a mixture of music, talk, chat, live chat as well. So it's good to see people doing different things on that platform, and just hopefully, I think that they're looking at it to be more commercial, but not yet, so that it can be, people can turn on the radio and hear it, because certain people won't be able to access the internet. Not everybody's on the internet or want to be on the internet. So.
For real. Give thanks. And to finish up, I will ask, what could we say is the future? What are the future plans and ideas for the house, for you both as individuals, and for the whole work that's going on? Again, for coming back to Ethiopia.
Okay, for us, for Ben's is 30 years this year. So for that 30 years to know that it has not been at Fairfield for 29 at Fairfield House for 30 years is an achievement for any black organisation that is not funded properly. And and we have found that very difficult over the time, but somehow we've managed and got here. But now we're strengthened, because we're strengthened with the CIC board, we're strengthened with the other community groups that are in Fairfield House that we've just mentioned. And as we go forward, we need to see that strength, we need to see that level up where people don't see the house as a drop-in, don't see it as a freebie. They have to see that they have to have ownership, because that's what Benska had to do. It had to take ownership, because at one point all it did was it went in, it did its service and it came out. But when the council came for it, it then started to put things up on the wall. It started to make other people be aware. So the awareness as well of Fairfield House, and that who is using it, and it's open to all. Because His Majesty would not have just have left it, although he left it for age, and we respect that, and we will continue that. We know it has to be a community, and a community has to work together, and that's how we see it forward. For the CIC, it's the same thing, that they are planning way ahead. You know, the 2-year lease, when it comes to an end, they have to look for 25, then they have to look for 99 and forward, but they cannot work if people are not prepared to work with them to make sure that happens. So,
Yeah, I think we've got like a start-up organisation to protect the legacy. I think it's achieving takeoff, and then you have to sort of stabilise. But once we stabilise, there's going to be the massive disruption of a major refurbishment to this building that's going to change everything while it's happening, and it'll be different afterwards. So, and there's also, there will be a project to take the bungalow site, the site of the first Ethiopian church, and look at how it would best serve the community in light of His Majesty's wishes, and whether that's a better facility which is more dedicated for the aged, or whether it's accommodation or a prayer or meeting space. We would have to ask the communities to decide. So 2 big projects, refurbishing an old house, a new build, and then beyond that there's a sort of stable state, which is, this is celebrating His Majesty's legacy, the most important building in Europe for many people. So that's what we see getting to.
Yeah, nice to talk. Give thanks. Of course, encouraging ones to go and check out the documentary, Footsteps of the Emperor. You'll find Sister Pauline inside. I'm not sure if William's present in that.
That's before my time, but I love it. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And obviously,
founding document.
Yeah, obviously Rastafari, you see some of his story in that documentary. I have to pick up Rastafari, of course. Could you tell us quickly, to officially finish off, about Rastafari and his kind of story with the house as well?
Well, Rastafari I've known for many years, and the day I walked into Fairfield on behalf of Benska, he was sitting there. So to me, that was a sign, and from that day until now, we've worked together on different projects in the house, and supportive of each other and supportive of everything that's happening, because he will work alongside. Sometimes there's joint things going on with the Ethiopian family celebration, and that if we're having an opening, it's happening. But as time go on, there's always challenging in what we do and who is around us. But with Rastafari, it's keeping strong, and it's keeping that Sabbath going, and also supportive of all the other Rastafari group that comes to Fairfield House, because what we want to see when you come to the door, we're neutral. We're not one and not the other. So everyone that comes, he does support that. He's looking at teaching, for people who don't know about Rastafari. He works with any of the organisation that we bring to Fairfield House. He's part of the tour that we do. But people always ask, what is the connection between His Majesty and Rastafari? So for me to explain that, I probably do a good job. So sometimes we have to call him or somebody from within that sector, as well as Rastafari, and they are the persons who can do so. And we have in Fairfield House a room that is dedicated to Rastafari. of the foundation of Rastafari. So when people come in, they will see that, and they're invited to come to any of the events that happen at Fairfield House.
So we've got a range of purposes, as we've discussed, but I think it's essential, we see it as essential that Rastafari worship should be protected and accessible and available. That means we have to work with someone to provide the worship in a way which works for our neighbours and other communities. Raspi has done a wonderful job for many years, and you'd be happy to work with him. There is one thing that's come with the signing of the lease, is a formal commitment to abide by the Equalities Act. So Fairfield House wants to be exemplary in observing the sort of equality that His Majesty stood for between races, but also in other respects, in all protected characteristics. So that suggests there has to be a liberal and inclusive form of worship. You don't say, oh, certain people can't participate for whatever reason. And I think working with Rastafari, we can certainly achieve that. We'll obviously meet a successor one day. Won't we all?
Yeah.
Super.
Amazing. Give thanks for the reasoning. Sister Pauline, Brother William, Managing Directors of Fairfield House. Full directors, the official title, Managing Director.
Well, it's director, not manager.
Yeah, so Pauline is a board director,
Okay.
and I'm the co-chair, and my co-chair is Princess Esther.
Okay.
So we're volunteer, what you call non-executive directors. I think we would like to have a managing director, but that's for the future.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Ishi, we give thanks for the work. Keep preserving the house, and I hope to be there very soon when I come to England.
That's our pleasure.
I look forward to that.
Straight up, fam, like an arrow, in tune to His Imperial Vice radio station, from my father's house, live and direct.
Juice breakfast.
Sion Kefita, Rastafari.
Guidance, detection, you know.